All right, ladies and gentlemen, I have an excellent segment for you. The how to vote cards are out. Now, for the 95% of people that watched my segment last night with John Latta, you would have seen the rationale behind why we picked the candidates that we did. But there is a small percentage of people in my audience, like Charlie, who's a good friend of mine, who had the following questions. Joel, why did you back Labor? Joel, why didn't you preference independence? Joel, why didn't you preference the freedom parties? Very simple answers to these questions. And after my phone call with Charlie, he was very satisfied by my answers by them. And we're actually doing a live tonight to further explain them so that there's no more confusion. So when it came to these elections, for the local elections, they're not the same as the state or the federal elections. You know, with the state and federal elections, I say, yep, preference the freedom parties and put the major parties at the bottom. It's not the same with the local elections. With the local elections, the water is a lot more muddy. Why wouldn't you preference the independents? Why wouldn't you just preference them and, you know, not preference Labor or Liberal? Simple answer for it. With the independents and the local elections, in many cases, you've got a situation where some of them are Chinese Communist Party backed. Some of them are neo-Nazis. Some of them are fronts for the worst parts of the Liberal, Labor and Greens parties. But you don't see that. All you see is independent. Well, that's where my team comes in. We go through the electorates. We look at the best way to vote with sometimes the worst choices. And I'll mention some of the examples. And it really makes you angry because it makes you ask the question, why are my choices so crap? Where are the freedom parties? And I'm on your side, guys. I know you. I'm right there with you. So I preferenced 12 councils. I came out with how to vote cards for them. And those councils included the following areas. You've got Bayside, you've got Blacktown, you've got Burwood, Canterbury-Bankstown, Cumberland, Fairfield, Georges River, Liverpool, Parramatta, Penrith, Strathfield, and the Hills Shire. We unfortunately didn't have the team to go into this level of depth in all 141 councils in New South Wales. It was too much. But for the federal election, we've got a 6-month run-up, and we will for that one. But in these particular electorates, there are local elections where the choices that we had were really bad. You had a situation where, let me give you an example of one area, and I won't name the wards because I don't want any lawsuits, but there was one electorate where you had either the Labor Party or 2 China-backed candidates. Now, do you see why I can't name the ward? And so people are like, why did you preference Liberal? And it's like, well, first off, there were no freedom parties. And there was also, you know, a choice between 2 China-backed candidates or the ALP. You got to vote. You got to pick someone. And this is the best candidate to sort of go with. Here's another one for you. You're going to love this one. You've got a situation in another electorate where you had a neo-Nazi aligned independent. You had an independent that was aligned with the worst part of the Liberal Party. And people are wondering why I backed Labor in that area. And I'm like, guys, it wasn't a choice. It wasn't a hard choice at all. You have some terrible choices in these elections, and that is not your fault. I mean, it might be if you should have run, but it's not your fault. This is a lot of the conversations I have with the freedom parties, and let's recount who the freedom parties are. You've got the United Australia Party, One Nation, Australia One, that's Ricardo Bossi. You've got the Liberal Democrats, the Libertarian Party, and you've got the Cooperative, which is the GAP Party, Great Australia Party, the Federation Party, and IMOP. Those parties, out of all of them, only one of them ran a candidate in a single area, and that was in the Parramatta ward, in the Parramatta Council. That was the only one. In the federal election, you're going to have the choice in some electorates, in some seats, there are going to be like 5 freedom candidates. You'll be spoiled for choice. But in the local elections, they have made the choice to not run. Now, that's something that I've talked with many of them about, and I've even offered them candidates. I said, hey, take this person, put your brand on it. They're not interested. They're not interested. They're not interested in giving you that choice. So what does it mean? You've got to vote for someone. What it means is you're left with these bad candidates. You're picking between neo-Nazis, the Chinese Communist Party, and the major parties. That's ridiculous. That's not a choice. But unfortunately, they asked me for guidance, and I said, look, I don't want to do this. I would prefer to just, do how to vote cards for the state and the federal election. It's nice and easy, nice and clear cut, and we can call out any of the freedom parties that try to stab the other ones in the back. But locally speaking, it's not that simple, guys. If just because someone says they're independent doesn't mean they're independent. So what does this mean we do from here, basically? Well, essentially, it means that a lot of these candidates, they need to be replaced in 2.5 years. The reason why this election has been delayed is because of the pandemic. Now, it was meant to happen, I think, about a year ago, this particular election. And what it means is that rather than the election being in 4 years, the next time these people go up for re-election, it's in 2.5 years, which is good because it means they're not going to be in there for very long to do much damage. When it comes to who you want to run in the next election, you need to be pressuring the very freedom parties that I listed before, the 5 freedom parties. You need to be pressuring them to put candidates up, to look for someone to endorse. And if there's no candidate in your area, you need to start considering right now if you're going to run in 2.5 years, and start preparing, start engaging in the community, start engaging in your party and say, hey, would there be an appetite for a candidate like you to run in your area? These are the sort of things that need to start happening, because if you're upset with the choices that we've got here, we worked with what we had, and the team that we had together, they know these candidates. A lot of them know them personally, and they want to make sure that we don't end up with a neo-Nazi in council. You can't just blindly vote for an independent. You have to actually know what's going on behind it. So if you want to be angry at the choices that you've got here, you got to only look at the very parties that you share their content for, that you donate to, and all of that good stuff. I've got your back, guys. This is why I'm not a member of a political party. I'm not a shill for the Labor Party. We've got a situation where you've got some bad choices. And a lot of the people in my audience over the last month or so, when I said local elections were coming up, they said, Joel, we need advice. And 95% of people that have come back to me, and the over 2,000 people that have put their address into the link above to get a how to vote card, they've all come back and said, thank you for your guidance. We weren't sure who to vote for because they look at the candidates and it's like it's only major parties, and they didn't know who the independents were and what they stood for. And so that's where we come in. Now, when we come around to the federal election, guys, remember the local election is very different. There's no freedom parties in the local elections except one area, which is the Liberal Democrats. When we come to the federal election, very different story. You will know that, there's something wrong with me if I start preferencing the freedom parties below the major parties. That's when you can get me. But if this is not the time for that. The local elections is very different. It's a bit more personal. The jurisdiction of the local electorates are very different. They don't have control over lockdowns. They don't have a control over a lot of these aspects. And I've always got your best interests in mind when it comes to this stuff. So I'm hopping on a live later tonight with Charlie. Charlie's an absolute legend. He's got a heart of gold. And when he made this segment, he wasn't sure about the rationale, but he wanted clarification, and that's why he asked me. And I always want you guys to ask me for clarification on this if I haven't answered it already. So I'm doing a live with him tonight to go through some of these questions and explain it to him just as I did on the phone. Because one of the problems we've got with our democracy right now is the political class. They don't take the time to explain these things to you guys. That's where I come in. And that's where I'm here to help. I'm here to offer my knowledge and the expertise that the team bring that made these how to vote cards out. I don't have a big role in the how to vote cards. I leave that to the team to do it. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how these elections go, because if there's one thing that the Liberal Party don't like and the Labor Party don't like is its smarter voters going after this stuff. And I've had a lot of calls from very grateful candidates, very grateful independents that are good candidates, and they're very happy that we've backed them, and they're very happy that they're getting up. And the last example I'll give, and this is a funny one, sometimes you'll get a bad party, they'll put a good candidate up. Let me give you an example, the Greens Party. Now don't get me wrong, if it was a federal Green or a state Green, you'd almost put your finger in your throat and throw up. But this particular Greens candidate, they're actually pro-choice on the jab. And they're so pro-choice that they actually were denied entry into a lot of their council meetings that happened during the lockdown. This is you don't read that when you read Greens. You don't see the intricacies behind these people. My team does, and they do see this stuff. And that's why I'm here to help you guys. I'm here to explain this stuff to you. Thank you everyone that's been looking at this segment. Share this segment out. And if people are looking for how to vote cards in those 12 councils that I mentioned before, send them the link. And this is the thing, guys, remember this, the how to vote cards are just a voting recommendation. You can always change it. But there's been a lot of people in the last couple of months that have been saying to me, Joel, I need some advice on how these segments should be. And they want advice on how to vote. And I said, oh, okay, this is a good point to go from. And these are the best from the options we've got. This is the best way to vote, and with preferencing and all that. So thank you everyone, the majority of you got this, but a lot of people didn't. And this video is for those people. It's so that you can understand exactly what's going on here. I hate the major parties. I really do. I want the freedom parties to get up. But the freedom parties didn't run in the local elections, and we deserve better from them. In 2.5 years, when the local elections get up again, and when we have the opportunity to throw these people out, put your hand up or demand that there's a candidate in your area. Ask for your freedom parties to do better. You donate to them, you share their content, you support them when you volunteer. The least they can do is actually represent you in your area. And we've got to start thinking local. It's not all about the glamorous federal election. Remember, these lockdowns came from a state level. So we also need to run in those electorates as well. And a lot of the freedom parties won't run there. I've got your back, guys. I always have, I always will. And you guys are legends, especially those that got it. But for those of you that are a little bit slower on this, that's okay, guys. That means I haven't done my job explaining this properly to you guys. And I'll take all the time in the world to explain that. And I'll see you guys on the live later today with Charlie. But I'll see you guys later. Thanks so much. And give this segment a share. Get it out there. Make sure everyone can see if they're unsure how to vote. And I'll see you guys later. Take it easy.